Good morning, friends. Happy Monday. Here's your Monday Minute. Today, I invited Jan and Rita here with me. They're both therapists here at Mayfield, and I really wanted to talk about the concept of codependence. And it's a term that some of you may have heard before. I think it's a term that holds a lot of different meanings for people, so I kind of wanted to start the conversation off with Jan and Rita introducing kind of the lens through which they see codependence.
So Jan and I work from a perspective of codependency where it's basically a balancing act. And I'm going to let her talk about a little more detail of Ross Rosenberg, who's the person that we really follow in this. But it's a self-love deficit. And it's really a teeter-totter with a -5 on one side and a +5 on the other. And it's everybody on the spectrum is a codependent, but in the relationship, a -5 almost looks for a +5 to do the balancing thing. And then if one starts to heal or do life differently, then it disrupts the balance. And so we see people kind of vying for their positions or things like that. And it can be in all different ways, from very subtle to actually covert, emotional digs. Sometimes it looks way different inside the home than it looks outside the home. And the biggest piece of that is recognizing, am I operating in a self-love deficit? If I'm unable to love myself, I only attract people who will love me to that level. So if I'm only operating at a -5, I'm not gonna attract anybody differently than that. And there are people who will spend a lifetime in a series of relationships doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. I think at its core, a codependent is the giver in a relationship to balance someone who is the taker.
Okay.
That person may be a parent, an intimate partner, anyone really, a boss sometimes. But we see that this tends to be constant over a lifetime. So if we're the giver now, we probably were the giver or the one who had to fix the whole family when we were young. The one who took that responsibility on our shoulders that was really well beyond what we were designed to do.
Absolutely. I think that's such a good piece there, even to notice how we were as kids versus how we are now as adults. And I think a lot of people connect codependency with either an intimate partner or a parent. And I think we do see them in so many other ways, whether it's friendships, peers at work, our bosses, things like that. So I love that you pointed that out kind of right off the spot. What do you have to add to that, Rita?
Well, I think it's really important to pay attention to the fact that if you are questioning whether you might be in a codependent relationship, one of the things to wonder out loud about is, am I doing this in more than one relationship? Have I been in a series of relationships where I'm typically the one that's doing all the work and not being fulfilled in any way? There are some feelings work that will say on one side of the feelings wheel, if we're feeling angry, sad, frustrated, whatever, and a myriad of other feelings, we're feeling those because our needs are not being met. And so if that's happening on a continual basis, it's probably really important to pay attention to that. And then pay attention to what your expectations are, because that can get in the mix also.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
So the way we look at codependency, it is the giver in a relationship. And often that comes from a lack of self-esteem. So we don't value ourselves enough. And so we end up being the giver and often are partnered with or friends with or so on with the takers. So, but at the core is that lack of self-esteem. It is that lack of value in ourselves. And actually we go back to attachment wounds for that.
Correct.
I think that's really significant too, because we have and will continue to talk about attachment and what type of role that plays in our lives. And so I think this is, again, another lens to understand our attachment, why it's important, and kind of how we can watch it play itself out in our lives and in our relationships.
Yeah, relationship is really important. But also we talk to our clients in terms of being mind, body, spirit creatures. And if there's a void in one of those areas due to an attachment trauma or wounding or lack of attachment, that's the void that we're always trying to fill by looking to that other person on the opposite end of the spectrum, right? So if I know that I subconsciously, even if I know that I'm only a -4, then I'm going to look to that super strong person to step in and tell me, oh, if you just do everything this way, life's going to be so much easier. And that really works great for a little while.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't work at all.
Right.
Right. And so if that's a pattern in relationships, that's another piece to notice and pay attention to.
Well, and I think it's so significant to really pay attention to ourselves in this process, not only in the way we relate with others, but our motivations for why we're doing such things. So like you were saying, it works really well to look to somebody who's maybe that +4 that really balances us out. But at a certain point, where are we not taking ownership for our own needs or behaviors or whatever the case may
Yes.
be, you know?
And the question that I have then is, where does that become unhealthy? Most of us are taught that it's good to give, that we want to give. But at some point, that becomes unhealthy because it's all about meeting someone else's needs. And I don't even know who I am anymore at that point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like both of you are touching on something that I think is important to bring up, but the concept of how spirituality might play into these beliefs and foundations that we hold. In one of the earlier episodes, Franklin and I spoke about the concept of a pro-social coping skill. And I think this is a little bit of one of those tricky spots because a lot of spiritual practices talk about being humble, being a servant, putting myself, putting somebody, I guess, before myself. And so how have you guys seen that play out in this concept of codependency?
Especially as women. I think it's been a big part of our spirituality and our culture. And so it's good to be a servant of in order to be the hands and feet of someone that we are engaged with. However, it can be done to a detriment to our self-worth and our self-value. And so it's very important to be mindful and aware of that fine line. And sometimes that's the hardest part because we don't know that there's supposed to be a fine line. And so if it feels natural to just give and give and give until you have to drop to sleep at night and wake up early in the morning and start giving and giving and giving again, you're probably on that spectrum in the negative area, right? And so it's okay to start to question and just notice. There's not an immediate overnight fix because it's a lifestyle and it's habits and it's, you know, it's learning to do things a little bit differently, and you can do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think this conversation is so important because I think there can be kind of some funky correlations when it comes to the word codependent. And when you really boil it down, both Jan and Rita have really dialed in the concept of it actually being about our self-love, our self-value. And are we living in a deficit or are we living in a healthy space where there's some balance in our lives? And so at the end of the day, that's really what I want to challenge you all in is that we can't really do anything about it until we notice where we land. Do you find yourself kind of on the plus side of that, of being really fine and confident in taking from the people who give to you well? And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a really beautiful gift to know how to take from other people when they give. I think the balance comes in being able to give and take. And just the same, do you find yourself on the negative side of that spectrum that we talked about? Do you find yourself giving all the time and not being really sure how to take from somebody when they offer it to you? Do your friends tell you, man, you just ask great questions, you know, but I don't know anything about you? That's a sign that maybe you're giving a lot and you're not actually sharing and taking from other people. So I think I just really want you guys to notice where you land on that. It might be tricky to kind of figure it out. If there's some safe people in your life, maybe ask them what they notice about you. Sometimes when we can't find it in ourselves, it can be helpful to get some feedback from people. Just make sure it's somebody that's safe and trusted in your life. And then just begin to notice. And then we're going to actually jump in more to this topic later on and give you some more action tools and skills once we have kind of taken the time to notice where we land on that. So thank you guys for being here. Thank you for being
Thanks,
a
Julia.
part of this conversation. I know it's not always the easiest conversation to have or the fluffiest conversation to have, but I think it's really important. So friends, get yourselves to Friday, enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you back here on Monday.